Hey guys, a lot of people have asked me how I use the Webflow MCP flexibly when I'm working with multiple different client projects and I want to scope them individually, but most importantly, when those client projects exist in different workspaces that I've been invited into. When you create a token, when you authenticate the Webflow MCP, you can scope it either to an entire workspace or to a series of projects within one workspace. You cannot scope it to all of your workspaces. It's not a personal access token. It has a slightly different methodology behind it. Maybe that will change someday, but for now, this is the situation we're in. And there is a way to do it. I'm going to show you how I do it. But first, I want to talk about how you would do it natively using the Claude desktop. I primarily use Claude desktop and Claude Code. The same approach in general should likely work if you're using something else like Cursor or possibly OpenAI, ChatGPT. There are a lot of different ways to do it, but let's have a look. So in Claude Desktop, this is all managed under connectors. It used to be that you'd go to a config file and you'd set up an MCP and it would use a standard IO protocol and point to a local handler called MCP remote, and that would then bridge to the remote hosted Webflow MCP server. Now it's much more direct, and I find that this works much better. So it's the only way I'm going to show you for now, rather than just confuse things. I can go to settings, I can go to connectors. All of these connectors are MCPs. At some point, I suspect that Anthropic would support A2A, which is an agent-to-agent agentic protocol. It's like MCP in terms of its intent, but it has some different mechanics as well. This whole space is evolving every day. So you can see here are a bunch of different servers I've set up, a bunch of different connectors. Here's Webflows. Now, I can disconnect Webflows and reconnect it. But as we said before, I can only connect it to an entire workspace or to a series of sites within a workspace. And that's not ideal because the process of disconnecting and re-authenticating takes a few minutes. It's a bit of a pain. If you're project swapping 6, 7, 10 projects a day, this is going to require a lot of coffee breaks. And you will probably be severely over-caffeinated. So let's try to sidestep that. I use a completely different approach. And so I'm actually going to take Claude Desktop off the screen, and I'm going to start a terminal. Now I'm on Windows. Apologies for that for you Mac lovers. My Mac is on its way. I just got an M5 Pro. Very excited about that. But I don't have it yet. So here we are. And I'm going to go to a project directory, projects, and I'm going to go to test. And what do I have in here? Perfect. I've got two test directories, WF1 and WF2. I'm going to create some projects there. Now, this is key. The way we're going to solve this connection and token issuance problem is by separating our projects by client. And the way that I do that is I think of it as each project has a folder. Whether or not I have code is not even relevant. There's a physical folder on the hard drive, and that folder is going to act as my project folder when I am working with the MCP. Now, Claude Code, VS Code, which is the tool I'm going to use here, is always working in a directory context anyway, and we're going to leverage that, and we're going to use Claude Code within VS Code. So I'm just going to go into a directory here. I would have created it, WF1, it's empty, and I'm going to start VS Code. And here it is on the wrong monitor. Here we go. I'm going to close that down. I don't need that right now. Everything is clear. We're good. Empty VS Code project. Now, if you look at Webflow's MCP documentation, you'll see if you go to the Getting Started tab page, and then you find the Claude Code tab under Installation. Interestingly, you'll see that Claude Desktop does talk about connectors and so on, but it also has some other options for connecting that include the older style MCP remote approach, which is using SSE to connect locally, as far as I can tell. We're going to avoid that. We're going to go to the Claude Code tab. And this second item here, this is what we want. This is a Claude CLI command for creating and defining an MCP server. And it contains a couple of simple parts. Claude is the CLI name. I'm adding an MCP. I'm defining the transport as HTTP. This means it's operating remotely, not as a local piece of code that we're executing. It's got a name that will be very important later. And this is the URL that it connects to the MCP server. Now we are going to change this, and we're going to change it in two important ways. First is we're going to add this part at the end. The reason is if I execute this by itself, it's going to go through the process of setting up the MCP server, but it's going to set it up globally on my whole system across all directories, all VS Code products. I don't want that. I want it to be scoped to the project directory that I'm currently in. So I use -s. And keep in mind, it's a single hyphen if you're familiar with CLI notation, double hyphens usually for the long names, single hyphens for the abbreviated names. You just want a single hyphen here. And by having single hyphen S and then project, I'm saying create the configuration in this directory. There's one other thing we need to change, the name. And the reason for this will become clear soon. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to change the name to, I'll call it Webflow. The reason is I usually talk to Claude Code. So saying Webflow is just easy and natural. It doesn't matter that it's long. I'm going to call it Signal, Webflow Signal. So this is one project, one client project that I want to set authentication for. I'm going to copy that. And I am going to, I'm in the directory, I'm going to execute it here. And you'll see that what happens is it creates an MCP JSON file. You could have done this manually. No difference. And it's got a name, which I've customized a little bit. It's got our protocol. It's got our directory. It does not have any authentication information, and that is okay. Now, I don't have Claude Code running yet. Now I do. What did I do? I clicked something twice. There we go. Now it's running. If I already had it running, that's fine. But I've changed the MCP server so to reload Claude Code with the new settings, I need to use the command palette. On Windows with VS Code, that's Control-Shift-P, and then I would go and type in developer reload window, and it just reloads the designer. But that also sort of reinitializes Claude Code. You won't lose any of your context. If you're in the middle of prompting, that is fine. That's all preserved, but it will force it to reload the MCP server, so now your connection is changed. Solve a lot of problems. That one tip alone was probably worth the time you're investing into this video. Now, there is now a /MCP command here I can run, and it has a nice visual interface that shows me quite a bit of important things. First of all these that begin with Claude.ai are the MCPs that are configured online through Claude Desktop. I have access to all of them here. If I want to read a Figma FigJam, I can do that. Kind of interesting. A lot of capabilities there, and I also have the Webflow connection there. It will be prefixed differently, but you do want to watch for that to make sure that you're using the right one, and it's another reason that I rename this especially. And here's Webflow Signal. You can see it is not authenticated, so let me do that. Clicked on it, authenticating, open in a new window, and I'm going to do this off screen for my clients, out of respect for my clients. Let me go through, and I'm going to, I mentioned that this one was going to be Signal, and here's the authentication screen filtered. You can see I've got a Signal workspace. I can select the whole thing, or I could choose a couple of sites in this workspace. I'm just going to click one. I just want one site for this token for this project. It should see nothing else. I'm going to authorize this, and it just takes a second, and once it's authorized, it's basically going to say you're done, you know, you're all set. If I go back here again and MCP, it is connected. Now, if I ever want to change that, it is pretty easy to clear authentication and then authenticate again. I can go through that same process. But the entire point of this approach is the idea that I would authenticate once per client, and then whenever I'm in that directory, I am working with that client's data. I should never have to re-authenticate again unless something changes, like I've migrated the site to a new site or my token expires for some reason, which I don't believe Webflows do very often. So, list the Webflow signal sites that I currently have access to. Now, what I want to query first is just to see what it's got connection with. Now, you'll notice that I specified the name of the MCP server I want. I want to give a good solid hint to Claude to make sure that it's executing the correct MCP. So I think of it like a verbal incantation or a keyword, and I'll name my projects that way, but starting with Webflow makes it very specific what I'm doing. You see here is the name of the MCP server it is calling, and this is exactly what I want to see. I see the name of the server here, Webflow Signal. It's checking the sites. If it began with Claude_AI, then I know it's using the wrong Webflow MCP connection. It's using the global one. In general, I've only seen Claude Code do that when it can't find the local one. So if something went wrong there, it will fall back to the system-wide kind of global connectors. But otherwise, it will always use the local ones as a preference. So let's continue that. Now, while this is happening, boom, there's my site. Let's do the same thing, but I'm going to go to a different directory. WF2 code dot, starting a second instance. I can close that down. It's all clear. We're going to do our exact same thing here, but now I want a different name. And I'm going to do, what am I going to do? Clean cars. Name of a different project. Everything else is the same, but I want a different name here. Now, I'll show you why that is especially important, but it is always good practice to keep your Webflow tokens separate by name as well. Scoped to project, we're good. It creates it. I open, where did it go? I've done something here. Let me find my toolbar. There we go. We'll continue. It opened it a little differently for some reason. Instead of a document, I don't have my normal icon in the corner there, which is a little odd, but not normally the case. I'll check into that later. I have invoked Claude Code. It is now running in this second project as well. We have created our new MCP JSON. Only difference is the name that I'm giving it. Now we want to check our MCP servers. Straight away, you can see that this needs authentication. Now, we expected that. But this is one of the reasons that having distinct names really matters. When you use local configurations, these MCP server configuration files in your projects, the configuration itself is maintained locally at the project level. It gives you a lot of capabilities, distinct naming, that gives you the ability to specify certain headers, or a lot of more advanced complex things you can do in configuring your MCP, which if you go deep into this will become very, very valuable as part of your knowledge tool set. However, if I had named both of these the same, if I had named both of them Webflow, when I do the authentication token would be stored globally. That means I authenticate one, I've given it access to a site, I go to the other different directory, different project, different MCP JSON, same authentication token. If I de-authenticate and re-authenticate it, I've now broken the connection on this one. So the only way to keep them separate is, not the only way, the best and easiest way to keep them separate is these unique project names right here. So let us authenticate and I can show you what these look like side by side. This will take me just a moment. Okay, we are authenticated. There it is, connected, clean cars. Now, because I have just authenticated and I changed the MCP JSON at some point, I am going to go ahead and do a developer reload window to make sure everything is current. And here we are, and list the CMS collections in Webflow clean cars. And I'm prompting it to hit the MCP server, and we want to keep an eye out and make sure that it is hitting the correct one, which should contain this in the name, and it is finding the site ID, so it needs to list that, and it is using the wrong one. You can see there, Claude AI. So I don't want it to use that one. No, use the local MCP, not the remote one. You must use Webflow clean cars. It did hear me correctly, but for some reason it didn't like that name. So this is a caveat you want to watch out for. The local clean requires authentication. So it doesn't think it's authenticated. CP. Oh, look at that. Something happened to cause it to de-authenticate. Let me try that again. Webflow clean cars, re-authenticating. I will be right back. And it says it's connected. We're going to close that down. I'm going to check it again just to see. Still says it's connected. Okay. Please retry that. It should be fully authenticated now. And let's see if it picks up the right one. So it's important to understand how these pieces fit together in order to ensure that they are being used correctly. And yes, that is the name I want to see. It is reaching it now. I cannot tell you what would have caused it to de-authenticate. I did reload the page. That shouldn't affect anything at all. So very interesting. And now it's going to the CMS tool, and we're going to see what, but it is definitely communicating. And then if I go over here, list the CMS collections in this site. Just make 100% sure that these two different directories and two different Claude Code instances are definitely using two different tokens with two different authentications. Again, in this situation, it does not matter if they are in the same workspace or different workspaces, and this is exactly what we want to see. So this is how I approach it. Now I'm going to take this discussion just a little bit further. I found this very, very useful. I have on my network attached storage over here, I keep folders for every client, has their logos and assets and data files and exports and mailing lists and a million other things that I need. There is also a directory there that I use for the purposes of my Claude Code connection. In many cases, I will have code for that client site, and in that case, it ends up being a VS Code project full of TypeScript and delivers through a CDN. And there I find Claude Code plus Webflow MCP is an incredibly powerful combination. But I don't need that. All I need is a directory that represents that client and a place that I can open Claude Code easily anytime, open VS Code and Claude Code anytime I want to work with that project. And this is the way to do that. Now, you can take this further. There are some much more advanced techniques for how you could handle authentication. If you do a deep dive, I recommend, I'll put it this way. If for some reason this approach isn't delivering everything you need, give me a shout. There is very likely a possibility this can be evolved further using header helpers, which changes the way the token is stored and changes the way it's re-authenticated. My understanding currently is that Claude Code does have some open issues right now. This is end of March 2026 in relation to token re-authentication for OAuth connections. It's in the works. This is likely something that will be vibe coded tomorrow. Who knows? Or maybe that's why they're having problems right now, as it was sloppily vibe coded. But that is currently a thing. However, as far as I understand, Webflow doesn't expire its OAuth tokens anyway for the API. So it is not a big issue in terms of needing to re-authenticate, and regenerate that token every time you connect. You should be fine. Either way, the authentication process should be pretty consistent and pretty smooth, and you should be able to jump in and out of those directories. There is another use case here that I really like, and it leverages this concept of the custom name. The scenario where I first started using this particular approach is when I started doing a lot of site migrations. Those site migrations were generally, I've got a Webflow client site that's existing. They want to build a new one. We've got a new design in the works. It's being Figma to Webflow migrated. We need to bring the data over. Well, we need to bring the data over with a lot of changes. They've got new features. They've got new pages. We're transforming the schema. Webflow's added a lot of features since the site was last built 6 years ago. So we want to take advantage of those things. Now, the problem is those site migrations generally mean export everything to CSV, manipulate the CSV, which used to mean building a loader. If it's a lot of CSV, you're not really going to be able to feed that to Claude Code safely. It will hallucinate. You will end up with issues when you give it just too much content to digest. You can have it write the scripts to do that modification, and then you could reload it. But what I generally want to do is restructure the CMS, load in content from documents and from other CMSs and from other Claude codes and so on, bring in all of the type tables, and then I'll worry about the million rows that in the main blog or whatever that needs to be brought in. And that would be something, wouldn't it? A million blog articles to read. I'm sure someone's done it. But I want to have access to both sites. Now, my particular criteria is I want one connection to two sites, but I want those two sites to not have to be in the same workspace. One of them might be in the client's workspace. The other one I'm building in my workspace as the service provider until I finish it and hand it off. Or any other number of situations, right? The other consideration that I have, which is going to require some further research, is that I would prefer that the production MCP connection is read-only. Currently, there is no way to stipulate that when you do authentication. There is very likely a way, and I'm sure there is, I just don't know the syntax off the top of my head, a way to stipulate that in the project at the Claude Code level. I could block all the tools for writing, probably within the .claude directory settings.json file. I believe that's where it's going to go, but you can find out yourself. So what I can do is set up a second connection here. I want to migrate from to Signal 2 or something like that. There we go. Exactly the same. Don't forget your commas. This is JSON. And now I've got two MCPs that I have to separately authenticate, that can be authenticated to different workspaces, and then with the right configuration settings in the Claude settings JSON, I can lock down one of them so that it is read-only. Much safer for migrations, much more sane, and I find myself doing this in the VS Code environment anyway, because I am still often working with things like CSV or document stores that are being migrated. Clients will hand me a Dropbox full of Google Docs or something, and now I have to parse them all and turn them into structures and load them. All that stuff all needs to live somewhere. Why not here? And then I have access to everything. Those files, both MCPs, I can access both sites. I can create everything I need, whether it's from the hard drive or from the originating MCP. It's a beautiful setup. There is a lot of flexibility to be had here in this particular configuration. So if you are doing anything kind of unique in how you want to set up your administration for your clients with your MCP connections, I highly recommend dive into VS Code or Cursor. You should be able to recreate something very, very similar there. Use these project level configuration files, separate your projects and your clients by folder, experiment with different types of configurations here, name them uniquely so that your tokens don't conflict and your authentications are separate. And that gives you a nice, convenient way to reference them as well, whether you're typing or verbally. Make it easy on yourself. And I think you're going to find a lot of joy in this approach.